thought you'd like to wear one today.
Morris, you're dead.
I know.
If you think Porky's is just a silly teen sex comedy, think again. Behind the crude jokes and steamy locker rooms is a movie packed with controversy, real-life inspiration, and some seriously weird behind-the-scenes secrets. From fake names and banned releases to how it accidentally helped a Christmas story get made, these 20 mind-blowing facts will change how you see this wild 80s classic. Fact 1. The film is based on the director's real life. Porky's might seem completely over the top, but many of the crazy moments were actually inspired by real events. Director Bob Clark said the film was loosely based on his own high school experiences growing up in Florida during the 1950s. Over the years, he collected wild stories from friends, teammates, and classmates, then mashed them together into what became Porky's. So yes, the infamous shower scene, the pranks, even the weird club raid, a lot of that was rooted in actual memories. Clark even said multiple characters were based on different versions of himself. Fact 2. It was a massive box office smash that nobody saw coming.
Please line up so that you can identify his tallywhacker.
When Porky's hit theaters in 1981, nobody expected it to do well, especially the critics. Major film reviewers trashed it for being crude, immature, and downright offensive. But audiences, they couldn't get enough. The film was made on a modest budget of about $4 to $5 million, and it absolutely exploded at the box office, earning over $160 million worldwide. To put that in perspective, Porky's outperformed some of the biggest films of 1982, including Poltergeist, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and even Blade Runner. It was the 5th highest grossing film of the year in the US, and by far the most profitable Canadian film ever at the time. What's even crazier? Studios didn't want to fund it at first. The script was passed around and rejected by almost every major production house in Hollywood. It took a Canadian production company to finally say yes, and that gamble turned into one of the biggest box office surprises of the decade. Fact 3. It's technically a Canadian film disguised as American. Even though Porky's is set in 1950s Florida and feels completely American, it's actually a Canadian film. The reason? Money. Director Bob Clark partnered with Canadian investors to take advantage of the country's generous tax breaks for local productions. That's why most of the film's budget came from Canada and why it's officially listed as a Canadian production even though it was shot in Miami. This clever move helped the film get made after multiple American studios passed on it. And in return, Porky's became Canada's highest-grossing domestic film ever, holding that title for over 2 decades. So yes, one of the most notorious American teen sex comedies was actually bankrolled with Canadian dollars. Polite, eh? Fact 4. Kim Cattrall regretted doing the movie. Before she was known as Samantha in Sex and the City, actress Kim Cattrall played the role of Miss Lynn Lassie Honeywell in Porky, the overly enthusiastic gym teacher whose howling performance in the locker room became one of the film's most unforgettable and most ridiculous scenes. But here's the twist. Cattrall actually regretted taking the role. At the time, she accepted it because she was struggling to find steady acting work and needed the paycheck. What she didn't expect was that her role would be heavily promoted in trailers and posters. When she saw her name in big letters on the film's marketing material, she panicked. She feared that being associated with such a raunchy, sex-heavy comedy could damage her career. In later interviews, Cattrall said she was embarrassed by the film's content and tried to distance herself from it. Ironically, that same over-the-top scene helped launch her into the mainstream. It became such a cult moment that it followed her for years, and whether she liked it or not, Porky's helped open the door to bigger roles down the line. Fact 5. Porky's helped A Christmas Story get made. Believe it or not, without Porky's, we might never have gotten the beloved holiday classic, A Christmas Story. Director Bob Clark had been trying to make A Christmas Story for years, but studios kept turning him down. They didn't think a nostalgic family film about a kid wanting a BB gun would sell. Then Porky's happened. After it became a surprise box office monster, studios suddenly wanted to work with Clark. But there was a catch. They would only back A Christmas Story if he first agreed to make a sequel to Porky's to cash in on the hype. Clark reluctantly agreed and went on to direct Porky's 2 the next day. That deal gave him the leverage to finally bring A Christmas Story to life in 1983. So if you grew up loving Ralphie and his Red Ryder BB gun, you actually have Pee-wee, meat, and a sleazy swamp bar to thank for it. Fact 6. Porky was almost played by a real sheriff. Chuck Mitchell nailed the role of Porky. Grimy, loud, and larger than life, but believe it or not, he wasn't the first choice. The filmmakers originally considered casting a real-life sheriff's deputy from Florida named Don Lydan. He wasn't an actor, but he definitely had the look. Massive build, intimidating presence, and a gruff attitude. Lydan stood at 6'8" and weighed over 320 pounds, which sounded perfect on paper. But when he auditioned, producers felt something was missing. Despite his size, he didn't have the exact sleazy, cartoonish energy they wanted for Porky. In fact, they reportedly said he was actually too skinny for the role. Yes, a 320-pound man was too skinny. So they went with Chuck Mitchell instead, whose booming laugh, sweaty face, and unapologetic sleaze gave Porky the unforgettable presence that made him one of the most ridiculous villains in teen comedy history. Fact 7. The character names are all hidden dirty jokes.
One of the cleverest and cheekiest things about Porky's is how it sneaks crude humor into places you might not expect. Starting with the character names. Almost every major character is given a name that's a not-so-subtle sexual pun, adding an extra layer of raunchy comedy to the story. Take Pee-wee, for example. His nickname reflects both his nervous, boyish personality and his anxiety about his size. Then there's Meat, the confident ladies' man, whose name is as obvious as it is ridiculous. Coach Ballbricker is a play on the term ballbreaker, which perfectly fits her over-the-top intensity and her mission to punish any boys caught peeping in the showers. Miss Honeywell, the gym teacher, earns the nickname Lassie after a certain howling scene in the locker room, and Cherry Forever, the woman the boys hired to help them lose their virginity, has a name that practically spells out her role in the plot. Fact 8. The famous shower scene has barely any nudity. One of the most talked about scenes in Porky's, and the one that caused the most controversy, is the infamous shower peeping scene, where a group of boys drill a hole in the girls' locker room wall to spy on them. On the surface, it sounds like a moment filled with nudity and shock value. But here's the twist. There's almost nothing to see. Despite lasting nearly 4 full minutes, the scene includes only about 8 seconds of actual nudity, and even that is mostly obscured or shown in awkward glimpses. The rest of the scene is just pure build-up and escalating absurdity, especially when Coach Ballbricker catches on and tries to yank one of the boys through the wall by his, equipment. Even though it's often remembered as one of the film's dirtiest moments, it's actually more about tension and ridiculous comedy than graphic content. Director Bob Clark knew exactly how to push boundaries without crossing into full-on explicit territory, and he used audience expectations to create a scene that's more awkward than erotic. Fact 9. Critics hated it, but audiences loved it. When Porky's was released, critics didn't just dislike it, they tore it apart. Legendary film critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert both included it on their lists of the worst films of 1982, calling it tasteless, childish, and a low point in modern comedy. Ebert even described it as one of the most offensive movies he had ever seen, pointing to its crude humor, sexist jokes, and complete lack of emotional depth. But despite the critical outrage, Porky's became a massive box office hit. Audiences, especially young ones, flooded theaters, drawn to the film's unapologetic raunchiness, over-the-top characters, and outrageous stunts. It became a word-of-mouth success, the kind of movie teens snuck into and laughed about for weeks. This love-hate divide between critics and the public became part of Porky's legacy. Fact 10. It was banned in Ireland.
When Porky's hit theaters in 1982, it didn't just stir controversy in the US, it also caused a stir overseas. In Ireland, the film was officially banned by the Irish Film Censor Board just days before its scheduled release. The board cited its excessive sexual content, vulgar humor, and overall lack of moral value as reasons for the ban. But here's where it gets interesting. After some public debate and pushback from distributors, the decision was reversed just 19 days later. That's right, Porky's went from being too offensive for Irish audiences to being allowed into cinemas in less than 3 weeks. It became one of the shortest bans in Irish censorship history, showing just how divided people were over the film. Fact 11. The film's only black character is a walking stereotype. While Porky's is often remembered for its crude humor and teen antics, there's one aspect of the film that hasn't aged well at all: its portrayal of race. The movie features just one black character, and his appearance is brief, exaggerated, and heavily stereotyped. In the scene where the boys go to Porky's strip club in the swamp, they encounter a massive angry black man wielding a machete who scares them off. He doesn't speak much, has no real backstory, and exists purely as a threatening obstacle, a caricature straight out of old racist Hollywood tropes. Fact 12. Most of the teenagers were actually in their late 20s. Like many teen comedies from the 80s, Porky's had a cast of high school kids who were nowhere near high school age in real life. Several of the actors were actually in their mid to late 20s, and in some cases even older. For example, Scott Columbie, who played Brian Schwartz, the smooth-talking, cool-headed member of the group, was 29 years old during filming. Tony Ganios, Meat, was also in his late 20s, and even Dan Monahan, who played the naive and awkward Pee-wee, was around 26 at the time. This age gap wasn't unique to Porky's. Hollywood has a long history of casting older actors as teenagers, but it does add an extra layer of absurdity to the film. Looking back, you can definitely tell some of these kids have 5 o'clock shadows and full-grown man energy. Still, the performances work so well that most audiences either didn't notice or didn't care. Fact 13, Pee-wee's measuring scene was based on a real teenage fear.
The film opens with one of its most ridiculous and strangely relatable moments. Pee-wee waking up, grabbing a ruler, and measuring his penis under the mattress. He stares at the numbers, panics, and yells, "It's getting shorter." It's absurd, but it taps into a very real, very awkward part of growing up, the fear of not developing fast enough. The scene wasn't just played for laughs, it was actually inspired by the kinds of genuine teenage insecurities that director Bob Clark wanted to highlight and mock. Many boys going through puberty feel pressure to measure themselves literally and figuratively, and Pee-wee's over-the-top panic is a cartoonish version of that anxiety. It's also the perfect introduction to Pee-wee's character, desperate, insecure, and completely clueless. From the moment he pulls out the ruler, we know exactly what kind of chaos this character is going to bring. Fact 14. The mysterious Porky's pen is never shown on screen. Throughout the movie, we hear the characters talk about the infamous back room at Porky's strip club, a place they call Porky's Pen. It's hyped up as this wild secret VIP area filled with strippers, action, and everything the boys fantasize about. It's supposed to be the ultimate goal of their night out. But here's the funny part, we never actually see it, not even once. Despite all the build-up, Porky's Pen never makes an appearance in the film. It's mentioned multiple times, teased as this legendary place where anything goes, but the camera never takes us there. It's all left to the audience's imagination. Whether it was a budget decision, a cutscene, or a deliberate creative choice, the fact that this infamous room is never shown adds a strange layer of mystery to a film that otherwise leaves very little to the imagination. Fact 15. 2 of the main cast members faced tragic ends. While Porky's is remembered as a wild and funny teen comedy, some of the real-life stories behind the cast are much more somber, especially for 2 of its key actors, Tony Ganios and Wyatt Knight. Tony Ganios, who played the lovable tough guy Meat, passed away in February 2024 at the age of 64 from heart failure. After Porky's, he appeared in a few more films like Die Hard 2 and The Wanderers, but eventually stepped away from acting. His character was a fan favorite, big, goofy, and oddly sweet for a guy with such a ridiculous nickname, and his death was felt deeply by fans of the film and his co-stars alike. Even more tragically, Wyatt Knight, who played Tommy, took his own life in 2011 at age 56. He had been battling cancer and endured multiple painful treatments, including bone marrow transplants. According to his wife, he struggled deeply with the physical and emotional toll and chose to end his life in Hawaii in what was later ruled a suicide. Fact 16. It held the Canadian box office record for 24 years.
Porky's didn't just do well, it made history. After its release, it became the highest-grossing Canadian film of all time, earning over $11 million in Canada alone and more than $160 million worldwide. That record held strong for an unbelievable 24 years, untouched by any other Canadian production. It wasn't until 2006, when Bon Cop Bad Cop was released, that Porky's was finally knocked off the top spot. But even then, the cultural impact of Porky's remained unmatched. For over 2 decades, it was Canada's biggest cinematic export. Not a sweeping historical drama or a classy art film, but a raunchy teen comedy about pranks, nudity, and revenge on a strip club owner named Porky. Ironically, the film that most people assumed was a low-budget American sex farce ended up becoming a cornerstone of Canadian cinema history. Fact 17. A real pinball machine floats away in the final scene. During the chaotic climax of Porky's, when the boys finally get their revenge and destroy the infamous strip club, there's a blink and you'll miss it detail that only true fans or pinball nerds would catch. A real vintage pinball machine floating away in the flood. As the building collapses and everything crashes into the swampy water, you can spot a 1970s pinball machine called Nip It drifting away in the background. It's not just a random prop, Nip It was a real arcade game manufactured by Bally in 1973. The machine was known for its cool design and a mechanical ball grabber feature, which made it stand out in arcades at the time. Fact 18. Porky's was almost rated X. Despite not being an explicit adult film, Porky's came dangerously close to getting an X rating when it was submitted to the MPAA in 1981. Why? Not because of graphic sex or nudity, but because of its raunchy tone, crude jokes, and sheer amount of sexual content implied throughout. At the time, the X rating wasn't just for graphic nudity, it was also slapped on movies the MPAA thought were too risque or morally questionable for an R. And Porky's, with its teenage boys obsessing over sex, peeping scenes, and a certain coach grabbing male anatomy through a shower wall, was towing the line hard. Director Bob Clark fought tooth and nail to keep the film from being labeled X. Fact 19. Alex Karras and Susan Clark were married in real life. In Porky's, Alex Karras plays Sergeant Ted, the no-nonsense cop who steps in when things spiral out of control. But what many fans don't know is that his on-screen authority extended beyond this movie, because off-screen, he was married to fellow actor Susan Clark, who also had a successful Hollywood career. The two tied the knot in 1980, just a year before Porky's hit theaters, and went on to co-star in the popular sitcom Webster, playing adoptive parents to the title character. Their chemistry on-screen was real because their relationship was too. They remained married until Alex's death in 2012. Fact 20. Bob Clark didn't want to direct the third sequel. Bob Clark, the director behind Porky's, may have brought the original vision to life, but by the time the third sequel rolled around, Porky's Revenge in 1985, he was completely done with it. Clark had directed the first Porky's and even helped with its sequel, Porky's 2, the next day, but he refused to return for the third installment. He felt the story had run its course and didn't want to be typecast as that teen sex comedy guy. Instead, he moved on to more serious projects, including the beloved holiday classic A Christmas Story. The studio pushed ahead without him, bringing in James Comack to direct Porky's Revenge. But without Clark's original energy and vision, the third film fell flat for many fans and critics. That's a wrap on Porky's. If any of these facts blew your mind or made you laugh, smash that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next video. Got a favorite fact? Or one we missed? Drop it in the comments, we love hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious, stay weird, and keep digging into movie history.